The outgoing head of ASIO this week warned the risk of espionage is greater than that of a terror threat. It comes as control over intellectual property remains at the centre of the US-China trade war. And as Australian businesses watch on, rock star cyber detective Rik Ferguson warns protecting your data should be the top priority. I spoke to him from Melbourne. Rik Ferguson, earlier this week, the outgoing head of Australia's spy agency said the threat of a state-sponsored cyber attack or international espionage was more dangerous than the threat of terrorism. Do you agree with that statement?
I think that statement is certainly true if you're talking about a digital threat. Obviously, if the conversation goes into the realm of physical threat, it's a different conversation entirely. Certainly, being British, we've had our own direct experience of physical kinetic threat on the ground from terrorism. But certainly if the conversation is restricted to digital, that's the battleground that it's going to play out in for sure.
Who is the number one state-sponsored cyber enemy that the world is facing at the moment?
You know what, it's incredibly widely distributed. So really, I guess it depends which side of the fence you're sitting on. We know that my government is using digital tools. We know the US is. We know that Russia, China, North Korea. So really, it depends on your perception of danger, depends on which side of the fence you're sitting on.
The Cambridge Analytica data breach is still fresh in the minds of many people around the world. What's the worst case scenario when it comes to data breaches?
You've got to ask yourself the question, how often can my data be breached, me personally? How often can my data be breached? And the answer is once. Once your data is out there, it's really academic whether it's been breached again and again and again. And I think what's happening to us as general users is we're beginning to suffer from data breach fatigue, if you like. How many more notifications are you going to get in your inbox from how many more companies until you think, well, I have nothing left to protect anyway? And some of the more serious breaches that we've seen recently are not really in terms of quantity of data, but it's in the types of data that are being stolen. So there's been breaches that affect, for example, biometric data. You can change your email address. You can even, with a bit of financial effort, change your physical address. But you're not going to be able to do much about your fingerprints or your facial geometry. And those are the kinds of things that we're now using to authenticate or identify people. They're being stored in databases, and those databases become prime targets for attack.
Do Australian businesses protect themselves enough against those threats?
It's a global phenomenon that there is far too much low-hanging fruit for criminals and attackers in general.
And what's the cost for a business if they are targeted?
I guess it depends on your reaction to the attack. So take, for example, ransomware. If you decide to pay the ransom, then the cost to your business is the cost of the ransom. And the way that ransomware criminals are evolving their business model is they're no longer attacking individual consumers. They're going directly after businesses, and they're going after what they consider to be soft targets, government departments, healthcare, people who are maybe focusing their budget in other areas or who maybe are underfunded. But they're asking for elevated ransoms because if they've encrypted your data, then they know that you don't have access to it, and they know that you're more likely to pay the ransom. So $600,000, $500,000 for one event if you choose to pay the ransom. If
a person or a business's data is stolen, is that it? Is there ever a chance to get that back?
In all honesty, if the criminals are doing, quote unquote, a good job in their own terms, then you will get your data back if you pay the ransom, because weirdly, it's a business model that relies on trust. If word gets around that, hey, by the way, if you pay the ransom, you don't get anything back anyway, fewer people are going to pay the ransom. So far cheaper to put a good security strategy in place in the first place, make sure you're protecting your data, make sure you've got effective backups and that you're keeping multiple copies, including one copy offline so it can never be affected by a digital attack. And that in the event of a successful attack like that, you are able to restore from backup and recover and carry on doing business.
Rik Ferguson, thanks for speaking to The Business.
Thank you very much.